Alright, these are 2-1 notes on midpoint. Objectives: you'll be able to find the midpoint of a line given two endpoints. Find the midpoint of a line given two endpoints on a 10 by 10 graph. Find the midpoint of a line given using a line measurement tool. Find the other endpoint given a midpoint and the other endpoint. And you'll also be able to find the distance of a line segment with the given midpoint. Alright, so looking at this, we got a line here all labeled up with numbers. Our goal here in example number 1, find the midpoint of a line segment with the given endpoints. So our endpoints here are B and E. Now if we want to find the middle, because the midpoint's all about the middle, we want to find what's the middle of B and E. One of the ways we could do this is simply just counting the boxes inward between B and E. So -6, if you go 1 to the right, it's -5. From E, if you go 1 to the left, it's at 3. If we go 1 more to the right, we're at -4 from B. And then 1 more to the left from E is at 2. Go 1 more there, and 1 more here, then 1 more there, and 1 more here. So now, we want 4 to the right from B, and 4 to the left from E. If we go 1 more here, and 1 more here, these 2 points, they meet at -1. That's the midpoint, or the middle, of B and E. That's one way you could solve it out. I do think it's a little bit easier if we just take the average. So in other words, if B is at -6, I'll make the numbers a little bigger, and E is at 4, all we gotta do is just add the two of them up. -6 plus 4 equals -2. Then we divide it by 2. So -2 divided by 2 gets us -1, and that will get us our answer. So the midpoint is -1. Looking at number 2. Find the midpoint of a line segment with the given endpoints. Since B is at 2 and E is 10, we add up the two endpoints. So 2 plus 10, we know is 12. So 2 plus 10 is 12. Then we need to divide by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So 6 is the midpoint of endpoints B and E. So 6 is in the middle. Just to confirm it, by old school way of doing it, go to the right, 1, 2, 3. Left from E is 1, 2, 3. If we go 1 more, we're at 6. 1 more here. And it turns out 6 is perfectly in the middle of B and E, because the midpoint is the middle. Looking here at number 3. Same story, find the midpoint of the line segment with the given endpoints. B is at -9. E is at 4. So -9 plus 4 is -5. And -5 divided by 2 is -2.5. So the midpoint is -2.5. So to find that midpoint between the 2 points, you just add up those 2 coordinates and then divide by 2. And that finds you the midpoint. If we were to do it old school, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, they don't really meet perfectly in the middle until in the middle of -3 and -2, because they both have another little half jump to go. So the middle is -2.5. Alright, here's another way it could be presented. Find the midpoint of a line segment with the given endpoints. So you have an endpoint of 5, 10, and the other endpoint is 7, 18. So you have to remember the first value in each coordinate is the x coordinate. So we have to find the midpoint of the x's first, and then we're going to find the midpoint of the y's. And the y values are 10 and 18. So first we find the midpoint of the x values. So 5 plus 7 is 12, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So we found the x value of our midpoint is to be 6. Now we have to find the average of the y values. 10 plus 18. 10 plus 18 is 28. 28 divided by 2 is 14. So our answer is 6, 14. That coordinate is our midpoint. Let's do this one. Two different numbers. So our x values are -4 and 5, and our y values are 17 and 34. So we take the midpoint of our x's, so we -4 plus 5 equals 1. 1 divided by 2 is 0.5, so my x value of my midpoint is 0.5. We do the same thing for my y values. 17 plus 34 is 51, and 51 divided by 2 is 25.5. So our answer is parentheses 0.5, comma 25.5, close parentheses. Alright, next up, we're going to find the midpoint of a line segment on a graph. So let's say we're given a 10 by 10 graph. We got 2 points, the 2 endpoints of a line segment. And our goal is to find the midpoint of that line, aka the middle of that line. So we take care of the x values, which b is the coordinates of 7, 2, so 7, 2. So I write that down. And e is the coordinate -6, 6. Write that down. Let's get rid of this. Those are just the steps that we're used to seeing. So our goal is to first write down the 2 given coordinates, just so we have an understanding. So we have b and e, so 7, 2, and e is -6, 6. And it's just like what we did before. We find the average of the x values. So those are my x's. So we have 7 plus -6 equals +1. +1 divided by 2 is 0.5. Then we do the same thing for the y values. 2 plus 6 equals 8. 8 divided by 2 gets you 4. So our answer is 0.5, comma 4. Example number 7. Same story. We first identify the 2 coordinates. So b is the coordinate 9 to the right, 3 up, and e is the coordinate 3 to the right, 6 up. Our x values are 9 and 3, are these 2 right here, and the y values are the 3 and the 6. So if we want to find the midpoint of the x's, we add up the x's. 9 plus 3 gets us 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So our x value is 6 in our midpoint. We then do the same thing with our y's. 3 plus 6 gets you 9. 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. So our answer, the midpoint, is the coordinate 6 to the right and 4.5 up. So parentheses 6, comma 4.5, close parentheses. That's our midpoint. Alright, number 7. Our goal is also to find the midpoint once again. Feel free to fast forward a little bit if you feel like you have an understanding of it. But there is also new additional material coming up, or different presentations of the material. So E is 2, 2. B is 8, 8. We add up our x values. 2 plus 8 gets you 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Our y values, it turns out it's the same thing. 2 plus 8 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the midpoint of the coordinate is 5, 5. Alright, last one of these, then we'll move forward. Alright, so the coordinate for B is negative 6, 4. The coordinate for E is 6, comma, negative 6. So we first find the x value. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So our x value is 0. Now we got to do the average of the y's. So 4 plus negative 6, which gets us negative 2. And negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So the midpoint is 0, negative 1. Alright, so the formula that we've been using, the average formula, is also the midpoint formula like you see here. We're going to take our two x values, you add them up, and then you divide the sum of those two x values by 2. Now we'll get us our midpoint value for the x. We add up our two y's and divide that sum by 2, and we get the midpoint for the y value, or the y coordinate. That's the midpoint formula. Now our next step here is we're going to find the other endpoint of the line segment when we're given the midpoint and another endpoint. So this one's a little bit trickier. We know what our formula is for your x's and y's to find the other endpoint of the line segment with the given midpoint and another endpoint. So our goal is to find, let's see if I can make this a little bit nicer. So here's the directions. So find the other endpoint of the line segment with the given midpoint and endpoint. So what we've been doing so far, this is our formulas. Here's one endpoint and here's the midpoint. We're just going to first substitute the x values of the given endpoint and midpoint in the appropriate variables of the formula. So our x values, the endpoint is a 6 and the midpoint is a 10. So we're going to put the 6 in for the x2 and we're going to put the 10 in for the x middle. So we're going to do x1 plus 6 divided by 2 equals 10. We're then going to multiply by 2 to both sides. So we're going to get x1 plus 6 is equal to 2 times 10. We know 2 times 10 is 20. We're going to subtract 6 from both sides. And we're going to get our x1 is equal to 20 minus 6. Because 2 times 10 is 20. 20 minus 6 gets us 14. So our x1 value is 14. That's the other endpoint. Now we're going to do the same thing with our y's. So we got y1. Let's do this. So we got y1 plus my y2. My y2 is going to be 8 divided by 2 is equal to the 16. Now we multiply by 2 to both sides. 2 times 16 is 32. So y plus 8 equals 32. We then subtract 8 from both sides, and you get y equals 26. Oh, sorry, 24. So our final answer, the other endpoint is 14, 24. Now I'll write that out. The other answer is 14, 24. That's the other endpoint with the midpoint of 10, 16. All right. Let's do that one more time. Well, actually, before that. So now, with our Algebra 1 skills that we learned, or our skills that we learned in Algebra 1, we can manipulate the midpoint formula below to make the missing endpoint formula. So we have our two midpoint formulas. We're actually going to create a formula. So all we have to do is substitute and simplify our numbers. So let's take these formulas. I'm going to slide this out of the way. Put this up. Our goal is to get the x1 by itself. So the first thing we're going to always do is going to multiply by 2 to both sides. So we do that. When we multiply the left side by 2, the divide by 2 and the times 2 cancel out. So that's why we don't write it. And then xm times 2. So the midpoint value of the x is going to be multiplied by 2. Then if we want to get our x1 by itself, we subtract x base 2 to both sides to get this formula. So to find that other x point, the other x endpoint, all we got to do is take our midpoint value, multiply it by 2, and then subtract the x base 2 from the sum that we found out. So you multiply by 2 and then subtract the other endpoint of the x value. Then we're going to be doing the same thing with our y values. We multiply by 2 to both sides. We then subtract our y2 value. So to find the y1, it's just parentheses y middle times 2, close parentheses, and then subtract the y2. That's how you can get your other endpoint for your y. So missing endpoint formulas are what you see here. Now we're going to do a couple of those together. So number 16. Let's use the midpoint formulas here. So example number 11. Our endpoint is 12, 18. Our midpoint is 2, 4. We're going to no longer use the midpoint formula. We're going to slide that out. We're going to use our missing endpoint formulas. So all we have to do is substitute things in. Alright, and we're going to do that actually in the next video.